Hello, my name is Colin Smith. For over a century, one name has echoed through history, a symbol of both magnificent ambition and profound tragedy: Titanic. She was a marvel of human ingenuity, a floating palace of steel and steam, hailed by her creators and the world as unsinkable. This colossal vessel, the largest of its time, represented the pinnacle of industrial achievement, a testament to humanity's belief that it had, at last, conquered the raw power of the natural world. She embarked on her maiden voyage not just as a ship, but as a promise of a new era of safe, luxurious travel across the unforgiving North Atlantic. But the promise was broken. The dream of invincibility shattered against the cold, hard reality of nature. The story we all know is one of a fateful encounter with an iceberg in the dead of night. It's a simple, dramatic narrative that has been told and retold in books and films. Yet, the truth is far more complex. A web of interconnected events and decisions, each one a thread in the tapestry of disaster. The iceberg was merely the final, brutal catalyst in a chain reaction that began long before the ship ever left the port. Today, we will journey back in time to look beyond the popular narrative and uncover the hidden factors, the overlooked warnings, and the shocking series of failures that sealed the Titanic's fate. We will explore 10 surprising reasons why this unsinkable giant now lies in a silent, watery grave, 2.5 miles beneath the ocean's surface. Some of these you may have heard, but others, I suspect, will change the way you see this legendary tragedy forever. The real story is not just about ice, but about iron, ambition, and human fallibility. Our investigation begins not on the icy waters of the Atlantic, but in the fiery heart of the shipyard where the Titanic was forged. Here, in the deafening clangor of the Harland and Wolff works in Belfast, millions of metal pins, known as rivets, were hammered into place, stitching the ship's massive steel plates together. These were the very sinews of the great vessel. The integrity of the entire structure, 3 million rivets in all, depended on their strength. But within these crucial components lay a hidden and ultimately fatal weakness. Recent analysis of rivets recovered from the wreck site has revealed a startling truth. Many of them, particularly those used in the bow and stern sections of the hull, were not made of high-quality steel, but of a lesser-grade wrought iron. This material, which contained a higher concentration of slag, a glassy residue, was more brittle, especially in the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic. Under the immense pressure of the collision, these substandard rivets likely popped, their heads snapping off, allowing the seams of the hull to peel apart like a dreadful zipper, opening the ship to the sea far more extensively than a simple gash would have. As the Titanic steamed across the vast dark expanse of the ocean, she was not merely traveling, she was racing. There was immense pressure, both from the White Star Line and public expectation, for the ship to make a swift and impressive maiden voyage. Captain Edward Smith, a veteran of the seas, was pushing his new charge at a speed of around 22 knots, nearly her maximum. This was a formidable velocity for a vessel of such monumental size, a speed that would make any sudden maneuver incredibly difficult. The danger was that this pace was maintained even as the air grew colder and warnings of ice began to crackle over the ship's wireless. The crew was well aware that they were entering a known ice field, a treacherous territory littered with frozen behemoths. Yet, the order to reduce speed never came. The desire to set a new transatlantic record, to arrive in New York ahead of schedule, seemingly overrode the fundamental principles of caution. The ship's immense momentum became a deadly liability. She was a leviathan hurtling through the darkness, with far too little time to avoid the danger that lay silently in her path. In the aftermath of the collision, as the horrifying reality of the situation dawned, the passengers' fate rested on the ship's life-saving equipment. And here, we find one of the most infamous and tragic failures of all. The Titanic was equipped with only 20 lifeboats. This number, while technically compliant with the outdated regulations of the British Board of Trade, was woefully insufficient. It provided enough capacity for just 1,178 people, barely a third of the total number of souls on board if the ship had been fully occupied, and only about half of those actually present on the maiden voyage. The decision was, in part, an aesthetic one. The ship's designers, and the White Star Line, felt that a deck cluttered with the full complement of lifeboats would spoil the view for the first-class passengers and detract from the ship's sleek, elegant profile. They operated under the supreme confidence that the Titanic was its own best lifeboat, that she was so robustly built that she would never sink rapidly enough to require a full-scale evacuation. This assumption, a fatal blend of arrogance and misplaced faith in technology, meant that for hundreds of people, there was simply no chance of escape. The iceberg that struck the Titanic was not a surprise encounter in an empty sea. It was a known threat. Throughout the day of April 14th, the ship's Marconi wireless room had been receiving a stream of messages from other vessels in the area, each one a stark warning of the danger ahead. Ships like the Coronia, the Baltic, and most critically, the Mesaba, all transmitted clear and specific reports of heavy pack ice, growlers, and large icebergs directly in the Titanic's path. These were not vague advisories. They were urgent bulletins from fellow mariners. Yet this vital intelligence failed to reach the one place it was needed most, the bridge. The two wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were employed not by the ship's line, but by the Marconi Company. Their primary duty was to transmit and receive paid messages for the wealthy passengers. Overwhelmed by this commercial traffic, they viewed the ice warnings as non-urgent. The most crucial warning from the Mesaba, which detailed the exact coordinates of the massive ice field, was never passed to Captain Smith. It lay on the operator's desk, buried under a pile of passenger telegrams, a forgotten prophecy of the doom that was just hours away. At the very core of the unsinkable claim was the Titanic's revolutionary system of watertight compartments. The hull was divided into 16 separate sections, separated by steel bulkheads. The design was such that the ship could supposedly stay afloat, even if 2, 3, or even 4 of its forward compartments were completely flooded. It was a remarkable feat of engineering, giving the crew and passengers an immense, but ultimately false sense of security. The fortress, however, had a critical design flaw. The watertight bulkheads, the very walls meant to hold back the sea, did not extend all the way up to the main deck. They rose only as high as E deck, with some reaching D deck. Imagine an ice cube tray with low dividers. If you pour water into one section, it will eventually spill over the top into the next, and then the next. This is precisely what happened to the Titanic. As the first 5 compartments filled with water, the bow was dragged down and the water simply spilled over the tops of the bulkheads, cascading progressively from one compartment to the next, sealing the ship's fate. In the critical moments following the iceberg sighting, the actions of the crew on the bridge were a cascade of human error, driven by shock and protocol. When Lookout Frederick Fleet spotted the iceberg and rang the warning bell, the command given by First Officer William Murdoch was hard a starboard. Under the old tiller command system still in use, this meant turning the ship's wheel to the left. Simultaneously, he ordered the engines to be put into reverse. This combination of actions may have been the worst possible response. Reversing the engines on a steamship of this size actually reduced the rudder's effectiveness, as it disrupted the flow of water over the rudder's surface, making the turn slower and wider. Furthermore, some experts argue that a head-on collision, while terrifying, might have been more survivable. It would have crumpled the first 1 or 2 compartments, which the ship was designed to withstand. Instead, the glancing blow, a result of the frantic attempt to turn, created a long, sporadic gash along the side of the hull, breaching 5 compartments and dooming the vessel. It was a split-second decision, made under unimaginable pressure, that had catastrophic consequences. After the collision, an eerie calm settled over the Titanic for a precious period of time. Many passengers were unaware that anything serious had happened, feeling only a slight shudder. Down below, however, the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was conducting a rapid damage assessment with Captain Smith. Within minutes, he delivered the grim verdict. The ship had sustained fatal damage and would sink. He estimated she had, at most, an hour and a half to 2 hours before she would founder. Despite this definitive and terrifying knowledge, there was a crucial delay in ordering the evacuation. Captain Smith, perhaps struggling to accept the demise of his unsinkable command, hesitated. The first lifeboats were not ordered to be uncovered for nearly half an hour after the collision, and the first boat was not lowered until a full hour had passed. This lost time was catastrophic. It created confusion and a lack of urgency among both crew and passengers, many of whom were reluctant to leave the perceived safety of the giant liner for a small boat in the freezing dark. The evacuation, when it finally began, was disorganized and tragically inefficient. The weather on the night of April 14, 1912, has often been described as unusually calm and clear. The sea was as flat as glass, and the sky was moonless but filled with stars. Paradoxically, these tranquil conditions contributed directly to the disaster. In a sea with even a moderate swell, waves would have been seen breaking against the base of an iceberg, creating a line of white foam that would have been visible to the lookouts from a much greater distance. But on this placid, mirror-like ocean, there was nothing to betray the iceberg's presence. It was a dark mass against a dark sea, a phantom of ice drifting silently in the shipping lanes. The lack of a moon further compounded the problem, plunging the seascape into near-total blackness. The calm, which might have seemed a blessing for a transatlantic crossing, instead became a curse. It camouflaged the agent of the Titanic's destruction, allowing it to remain unseen until it was far, far too late to avoid. High above the deck, in the crow's nest, two men, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, were tasked with the most vital job on the ship, to scan the horizon for danger. They were the eyes of the Titanic. But on that fateful night, their eyes were unassisted. In a baffling and ultimately deadly oversight, the lookouts had no binoculars. The ship's binoculars were, in fact, on board, but they were locked away in a cabinet, and the key was missing. The key was held by Second Officer David Blair, who had been transferred off the ship at the last minute in Southampton. In his haste to disembark, he had forgotten to hand the key over to his replacement. This simple, mundane act of forgetfulness had dire consequences. With binoculars, Fleet and Lee would have been able to spot the iceberg much earlier, likely giving the bridge enough precious seconds, perhaps even minutes, to steer the ship clear of danger. Without them, they could only rely on the naked eye against the profound darkness of the night sea. As the Titanic began its final plunge, its wireless operators frantically sent out distress signals, the now famous CQD and SOS calls, into the night. Several ships received these calls, but a series of miscommunications and misfortunes rendered them useless. The closest vessel, the SS Californian, was stopped in the same ice field, perhaps only 10 to 20 miles away. Her wireless operator, having been on duty all day, had shut down his radio for the night just minutes before the Titanic struck the iceberg. The crew of the Californian saw the Titanic's distress rockets, but tragically misinterpreted them as company signals or celebratory fireworks. Another ship, the Carpathia, did receive the SOS and heroically steamed at full speed through the dangerous icefield to help, but she was nearly 60 miles away and would take 4 hours to arrive, far too late for the majority of those in the water. Other ships that received the signals were simply too far away to be of any assistance. The Titanic, a marvel of communication technology for her time, died in a sea of silence, her desperate calls for help either unheard, unseen, or fatally misunderstood by those who were near enough to save her. The sinking of the Titanic was not the result of a single cause, but a perfect storm of failure. It was a tragedy born from a cascade of events where human arrogance, technological flaws, and sheer bad luck converged on a single fateful night. From the brittle rivets hammered in the shipyard to the ignored warnings crackling through the ether, from the reckless speed through a known danger zone to the missing key for a pair of binoculars, each element played its part. It stands as a powerful and enduring lesson that no creation of humanity, no matter how grand or sophisticated, is ever truly immune to the forces of nature or the consequences of our own fallibility. The story serves as a chilling reminder that overconfidence is a dangerous current, capable of steering even the mightiest of vessels towards disaster. The unsinkable ship sank, and in doing so, shattered the technological hubris of an entire generation. It forced a radical rethinking of maritime safety regulations, leading to the establishment of the International Ice Patrol, and mandating that all ships carry enough lifeboats for every single person on board. The echoes of those cries in the North Atlantic led to changes that have undoubtedly saved countless lives in the century since. The Titanic lies now in perpetual darkness, a memorial to the more than 1,500 souls who were lost. Her story continues to fascinate and horrify us because it is a profoundly human one, a tale of ambition, love, loss, and the hard-won lessons that can only be learned from immense tragedy. We've explored 10 of the interlocking reasons for her demise, each a crucial piece of the puzzle. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these reasons surprised you the most? Was it a flaw in the ship's design, an error in judgment, or a simple twist of fate? Let me know in the comments below.